Yep, yeah, buddy. How's everybody doing? Countdown to the end of the session is on, I'm sure. Um, Only a couple days left, so get your comments in, get your papers done, and we're good to go. Hopefully, I'll see you in the fall if you're around. I want to do a um, quick Always Sunny video here, and I I did this. I didn't post an episode um, on purpose. And big round of applause to any of you who just went with it and just watched a random episode of Always Sunny. That was kind of um, what I was trying to provoke. Um, so Kaylee and Adama and Grace and Jordan, well played. Um, the beauty of it, and Jordan, you hit the nail on the head. You took the words right out of my mouth. Um, they the show covers virtually every issue you can think of that's that has come about over its, I don't know, it's been on like 16 some seasons or something. Um, Everything from gun control, as Jordan mentioned, to North Korea, to um, Me Too movement, to Black Lives Matter, to um, just abortion, racism, like just the first. Here's how you know that this show is more than just a sitcom. The first episode was the gang gets racist, so they come right out of the gate swinging hard, right? And it's this interesting look at race. Now the show came out in 2005, so it was a different time to say the least, um, and it just sort of found its way on FX. So this kind of um, not obscure but niche cable network, and they kind of just did their own thing to great it. They, for me, they kind of show you what art is like when the 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 powers that be leave it alone. um I think it's a testament to that. Like they basically wrote uh, FX wrote them a blank check and said, I mean, you can do whatever you want, and they did. And it was it's hilarious. It's at times, um, it's loud. It's in your face. It's extreme at some points, but for the most part, it's topical. And that, granted, there are many episodes that are just kind of, you know, silly for silly's sake. Um, but they balance that with a number of episodes, as I mentioned before, that are really looking to provide perspective on issues and ideas and things that are actually happening in our world. Um, so, you guys, outside of Jordan, Kaylee, Grace, Adama, your comments were just like, "Oh, I looked for an episode about women because we were doing gender," um, and you certainly can find plenty of those. In fact, the dynamics of their whole group is sort of a gender examination, right? Um, there's the show for a long time was called um, Seinfeld on steroids because the core group, it's three guys and a girl, and in the situations of the situation comedy, the sitcom, are just amped up way higher. Um, Always Sunny than in than in Seinfeld. Um, but there's literally you could pick any concept or idea or issue, and Always Sunny has at least sort of approached it and given you some things to think about. Um, I think it's as versatile and topical and meaningful as any half hour comedy that's ever been made. So I think it's that consistent, and it's it's a little more nuanced than a lot of other sitcom approaches to things that might beat you over the head with the the idea or the issue. Um, I think it's a little more nuanced. I, I contend that it's it's funny because it's meaningful, and it's meaningful because it's funny, and it's meaningful and funny because it's so stupid. Like if you're not paying attention to the show, like my dad doesn't get it, right? My dad's in his 70s. He doesn't get it. He's like, oh, all they do is yell, and these whatever these stupid characters and situations. He just doesn't get it. I'm like, that's the whole point. It's like the stupider it is, the more you're gonna overlook it for meaning, and the more they're gonna be able to just sort of, you know, slip it in when you're not looking. Um, I hope I said this in my intro video at the beginning of the summer. We can learn the most from the things we take for granted. And this is an easy one to take for granted because Frank's insane and Charlie's a moron and Dennis is a narcissist. Like he just they're all these extreme characters. There's a lot of yelling and arguing and cursing and whatever, and it's easy to get lost in that and miss the larger point. Um, so, for all intents and purposes, the gang is basically America, right? They're a metaphor for us. Like, the way the world sees us is like characters from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Um, the principal characters, basically Mac, Charlie, um, Dee, Dennis, and Frank. If you watch season one, they added Frank in season two, so he wasn't there initially. Um, but think about how would you describe the gang, as it were? Loud, obnoxious, ignorant, selfish, lacking any moral compass. If they do have a moral compass, it's only there to serve themselves, right? Um, it's it's a it's it's us. that's how that's how a lot of the world perceives us. It's just like we'll never learn. Um, we sort of refuse. In fact, we refuse to learn, and it's one of those things where um, it's it's hard not to see yourself, some aspect of yourself. I'm not saying we're all complete assholes, um, like these people, but um, again, you're supposed to watch the show and like my dad. If my dad's watching the show, he'd be like, okay, why are they doing all of this? Why are they yelling? Why are they annoying me, I guess? And the answer would be like they're trying to say something, right? Exaggeration to the point of realization. Um, we're just not realizing it, I guess. Um, so they put America themselves into all of these different scenarios, and they actually, I think there's definitely two gun control episodes. Jordan brought up gun control, like that's a perfect example. It's like they put themselves into, and they represent like multiple sides of that gun control debate, and they kind of go through practically how things work, and um, they just they give some insight into it, I think, or they present it in such a way as like, how are we missing this? Like this is common sense. Um, so that's always interesting to me, is whenever they're in the midst of a debate or an argument or an issue. I'm like, which one am I, right? And how would I react? And what are my thoughts on that? I think that's what you're supposed. That's what they're trying to get you to do. Um, so that brings me to when I talked about nuance. Um, that's one of the ways that this show is nuanced. Is that um, it's never the same, or it's rarely the same people, same characters taking the same stance over and over again, if that makes sense. And that is a great lesson for America if they are America. The five principal characters represent America. Their ability to choose sides of a debate or an argument or an issue based on what they believe and their knowledge, regardless of whether they're supposed to align with that side or not, is is groundbreaking. In other words, it's not always like um, um, Jordan pointed out the gun control episode, right? Dennis and Dee take one side, Mac and um, Mac and Charlie take the other, right? It's not always Dennis and Dee against Mac and Charlie. In fact, it happens now and again, but every episode, part of the part of the joy of watching the episode, who's gonna team up today? Like, which side is Frank gonna go to? Some days it's Charlie and Dee. Sometimes it's Charlie and Frank. Sometimes it's Dennis and Mac. Sometimes it's Mac and Dee. But the way they choose sides, as it were, isn't the way we choose sides, by taking in all the information and using our own personal morals and values and things that we've accrued over our entire lives, right? Based on our families and our environment and traditions and religion and all that stuff. Um, we don't. They do that. They do that. They take all that stuff and they're like, okay, here's my position, and I'm aligning with this person, regardless of their affiliation, as it were, their religion or their political party or whatever it is. So we need more of that in our country, for sure. We need more like, you know what? I actually agree with the conservative on this one, right? And I'm gonna fight for that issue, even though I'm a liberal or whatever the case may be. Um, in most of the binaries that we've set up, we need more cross pollination between men and women, um, gay people and straight people, all the different races, the different political parties, the different religions. Like, there has to be more, like, you know what? Chris Rock famously said, um, if you make up your mind before hearing the issue, you know, getting all the information or a lot of the information, you're an idiot. Like that's we're a nation of idiots because most of us do that. Um, so this show sort of low key addresses this idea of picking sides, right? They're not picking sides based on blind allegiance to a higher power or a political party or a politician or whatever. They are actually thinking about what they believe before they believe it, which is, I mean, it sounds simple, um, but isn't always the case. Um, so that's uh, the biggest takeaway from this show is um, the fact that they're a metaphor for America. So when they address an issue like, you know, gun control or whatever, they sort of split up into factions, and then, you know, like their minds were changed in the process of going out and doing the thing, right? Like Jordan mentioned it briefly in his comment, that episode, they go out and Dee and Dennis find out, oh, it's not as easy as we thought to get a gun. And then Mac and Charlie go out and they're like, you know, the opposite. They both learn the opposite of what they believed, basically. And that is uh, a huge lesson to learn. You have to go through the sort of process of all that. There's a great episode. I mean, most of them are great, but about the gang solves the gas crisis. There's another one, which is as good a Bush era um, allegory as I've ever seen. Charlie ends up playing basically George W. Bush, and it's just there's no limit to sort of what they're looking to explore and expose, I guess. This is all, again, from a sitcom, right? Um, but it's another successful show that made money and is about something. Can often get obscured by, like I said, the cursing and you know, the sort of bawdy nature of the show and some of the over the top characters. Like they'll give you an episode about the gas crisis, and then they'll give you an episode about who pooped the bed, right? Like that's the gamut that you're running. Um, but I argue, like, that's important. It's important to have that kind of breadth, I guess. Um, so anyway, um, I wanted to keep this one short. Just get to the point. Those couple points about Always Sunny. Another great bingeable show. All right, I will see you guys in a little bit.